Woosah. Come on. There we go. All right.
We are live. Let's get Instagram going here. Maybe,
I
maybe.
know, right? Come on,
Yeah,
Instagram.
it's a night of technology, which it's. I want to know who decided to do this on Monday night. So I'm just curious.
I'm not real sure which one of us that was, but we really need to end up a shift. Appreciate everyone that is jumping on, everyone that is joining us, because let's face it, it is real, it is live, and we are who we are. Also, thanks to those listeners that are listening on our streaming platforms. But I will let you welcome everyone while I finish getting things set on my side.
Yeah, Becky, you had a client that had technology issues that pushed the client, the push. So anyway, so she's regrouping. So I'm gonna start while she regroups. Welcome everyone. Welcome to our podcast. We go live every Monday evening, um, 7 p.m. Central Time. And you can listen to us on all kinds of streaming platforms, right? I can't even list them all anymore. We're streaming on so many, but I'll give you a few. So we're doing Instagram, we're doing Facebook, we're doing Twitch, well, of course, YouTube, Apple Podcast, Spotify, iHeartRadio, X, Rumble, and I think there's several others Pinterest. I'm forgetting some other ones, but you can find us now.
We're definitely out there. We are hitting the reach. No matter whether it is audio only version or whether you are listening and watching us on one of the other video streaming platforms. So yes, you can catch us. We have various topics. We also do interviews and we have special guests and even a roundtable. So
Yep,
definitely catch us on our various weeks.
absolutely. So, um, Becky and I talk all the time. And by the way, I'm Sherri, and this is Becky, and we're two real women. We don't even like get super dressed up and have the fancy lights, and we just talk, right? And we want to help as many people as possible. So last week on our round table, we did a major announcement that I think is worth repeating. What do you think, Becky?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's definitely gonna support our mission and support what we are out here advocating and trying to do, and that is help the people. That's always been our mission, is to be able to connect and help the people, no matter whether we are on a podcast or whether we are in the community or any of us three coaches are just in a one-on-one session. We are definitely trying to help the people, individualize that, and that is something that you can't necessarily get from any of the online resources, the do it yourself calculators, et cetera, is to end up and have a coach that is evaluating you, going through, holding you accountable, doing all the things with you. And so the big announcement was that we are able to also accept HSA and FSA, so health savings account and flex spending accounts, for not only the community, but also for the one-on-one coaching. So those can be found if you go to bnccommunity.com. One, you'll get a big old pop-up box to check and see if you're eligible. If you need a letter of medical necessity stating, if you are someone that has to submit your receipts to one of these um, programs, we have partnered with TrueMed. So a actual physician ends up and determines your medical necessity. That can be anywhere from metabolic conditions, or we also end up and work hand in hand with those physicians to work on other conditions that may end up and warrant natural healing instead of allopathic medicine. But if you are utilizing allopathic medicine, we can end up and support you along the way on various, whether it's sleep, whether it's circadian rhythm, whether it's using nutrition as a therapeutic tool, we have the ability to end up and help you with those. So you can also, maybe you don't have an HSA or an FSA, you can still end up and book a one-on-one coaching with any of us three, Coach Sly, Coach Sherri, or myself. At that link, there is a little hamburger drop-down menu, or there are different graphics that are hyperlinked throughout the main page. So if you just click on that, it will take you, it'll tell you what our experience is in, and it will tell you kind of, take you through the booking process. So you can see, who you align with, see where we come from, see our background, and be able to book from there. So definitely take a look at bnccommunity.com and the coaching, as well as the community. The community has, we call them office hours now. So where one of us coaches is on the platform, you can come and ask questions. You can ask, maybe you have a protocol that you are following and you need help with adjusting something throughout that. Any of us are able to help you. Maybe, you are someone that is also working on parasympathetic work, and, you want to end up and check in with holding yourself and holding that accountability side. So we're definitely there during office hours. The community is also there during the day. The community holds a social hour where it is just community members converging together and talking about various topics. Doesn't necessarily just have to be nutrition focused. It can end up and be, photography. It can be what they've done today. I know they were discussing earlier the weekend and, what that looked like. And so it's just really being able to connect with someone that is on similar paths. Obviously, no two people are on the identical path, but many of us overlap our paths. And so we are able to, come together and have that sense of community where sometimes it's just a listening ear and being able to, speak with someone. So that is there every day. And we would love to end up and have you there joining us. It is, very inexpensive. And again, you can use your health savings or your flex spending on the community or the coaching. So we would love to end up and help you. On to the topic of tonight.
Absolutely. So, something strange happens about week 2 when you're in a new routine, right? So, we just had a whole conversation about, New Year's resolutions and why they fail. You want to go back and listen to our podcast, please do so. But what happens in week 2? Well, the excitement kind of starts to fade and your momentum slips, and suddenly the habits that felt effortless days ago now feel heavier than they should. And honestly, most people take this as a personal failure, but it isn't, okay? Tonight, we're going to pull back the curtain on what's actually happening inside your body during that second week slump, and from the way your brain processes motivation and to the hydration shifts that you don't feel, to the hormonal rhythms that quietly steer your energy. We're going to break down some of the biology tonight on why you lose steam and how to work with your body instead of fighting it. So, we thought this was a good topic uh, to dive into, and so let's go ahead and let's start off with what's actually happening in your brain, right? What happened? I mean, week 1, you were all excited, and then you had all this energy, and the brain, it loves new beginnings. But around days maybe 10 to 14, the brain shifts from, ooh, this is exciting, to this is work. And that's when people start feeling like they're failing.
Absolutely. Well, and motivation isn't necessarily willpower, right? It's
Right.
dopamine driven. And so that's where week 1, when you have, like you said, that new plan, right? That new routine, and you're all gung ho, right? You're creating that dopamine surge. The brain loves new, right? It likes new shiny things, right?
Yeah.
And it's definitely motivation driven. And so when that by week 2, when that starts to end up and fade and that dopamine starts to come down, it's more baseline, right? The brain starts to end up and say, well, this isn't exciting anymore,
Yeah.
and so people end up and quit, because they make the mistake of that dopamine normalization for, like you said, the failure, instead of creating, right, a
Mhm.
sustainable routine. And that's where I tell people to start out the year on what can you do at your baseline, right?
Right.
Maybe it's your bad day at work, or maybe it's, a high stress. Maybe you have several kids, and they're screaming and they've got activities and they've got this and they've got that, right? And you're go, go, go. What can you do on your worst day? And that's your baseline, right? So as your dopamine returns to this baseline, create that baseline. And then anything that we start to end up and add into that, right? It's not
Mhm.
necessarily always about this new thing, right? This new routine, but it's you're stacking into your your stable routine, right? You're creating that consistency where your body is starting to see that progress, because if you if you don't see the progress, right, it feels boring.
Mhm.
So you like to end up and see that reward, but yet any little thing that we can end up and do on top of, right, it keeps us going. It keeps us motivated, because it also isn't that all or nothing mentality that starts to create the failure side of the mentality, right? If you create this elaborate plan and I'm going to do, this and this, right? That first week it's great, right? Maybe you're in the gym, you're going hard, but yet then you end up and you get into week 2 and you start to lose steam. You kind of, hit a wall. The body is shifting also in potentially in fuel sources, right? Or maybe you're not fueling enough. I've talked with a lot of people so far this year that they aren't eating enough, and that can
Yeah.
play into it as well, right? You have all these very ambitious goals on adding things, but if you're also not fueling yourself properly, that's going to end up and, create a lull in what you're doing too. And so it's just really this method of, we're looking at long term. We're not looking at, okay, what can you do for the month of January?
Right. Right. Well, and let me stop for a moment. I'm going to back up. I'm going to tell everyone what dopamine is, right? That is your brain's feel good, keep going chemical, right? That's the when I eat a cupcake, I get this bliss feeling, right? That's the dopamine hit. Um, and so again, when you're hitting, week 1, it's new, it's beginning. The dopamine is running high. Um, but your brain is really trying to learn a new routine. And so there's extra energy that's happening, and you have to plan and you have to execute, and your habits are not formed at all, right? How long does it take for a habit to form?
At minimum 21 days.
Minimum, right? And so week 2 kind of starts feeling like it's getting heavy, right? And here's the other thing. So, um, if you haven't changed your sleep and your wake time and your workout schedule, your internal clock is catching up, right? And so, what am I talking about? I'm talking about your circadian rhythm, and that is your body's 24-hour clock that controls your energy, your hunger, and your mood. All right. So, let's kind of break that down a little bit more, Becky, and um, talk about some of those aspects.
Yeah, and that's where people start to end up and get into a sleep debt, right?
Yeah.
Because it starts to end up to show up because maybe they're doing, 4 a.m. workout or 5 a.m. workout, because, they're all gung ho in this new structure. And when you have poor sleep, you end up and you have these low dopamine receptors, but also low sleep means higher cortisol. high cortisol equals low motivation. So, I mean, you're kind of chasing your tail, a hamster in a wheel. Sleep isn't optional. And that's where many people will end up and sacrifice sleep. But it's also not about just the quantity of sleep, but it's about the quality of sleep, because there's so much that ends up and happens in our sleep, whether it's, the leptin, the cortisol side of things. We need cortisol. And this is where I feel like many people are getting it wrong, because you'll hear, cortisol drinks and this supplement for lowering cortisol. And what you actually want is a natural rhythm to your cortisol, just like you referenced circadian rhythm, right? We have a natural rhythm. Hence why I'm sitting in, my amber color light, is because you want natural rhythms, just like light and dark cycles. And that's where it does end up and regulate these other hormones. And when we change our habits, people don't end up and take into account, right? They're just looking at one section, right? They aren't looking at the body as a whole. And so cortisol, you want it to naturally rise in the morning, not a sharp peak. You don't want to be in the gym blasting yourself with, fluorescent blue lights, because that's going to end up and raise your cortisol. But it's also going to end up and raise blood sugar. It's going to end up and create a stress. It's going to create irritability. It's going to shift your routine as well, to where then potentially even at night you will feel wired but tired, because you're creating this circadian misalignment. And so, even eating before going to the gym, which a lot of people, you work out fasted, etc., etc. That's not necessarily optimal for many people either. Now, yes, there is a lot more context, and we could, have several podcasts in regards of all of these hormones. But the other side of it is, if you are raising your cortisol like that in the morning, you are setting yourself up for an insulin and blood sugar roller coaster the rest of the day. So your blood sugar isn't going to be stabilizing. You're going to create these massive, swings where it's elevated, but then it ends up and it drops, and you become potentially hypoglycemic, and you start to end up and feel weak and you crave. Well, what happens when we end up and we feel tired, when we end up and we feel those cravings? By week 2, a lot of people are already given into them. So even though you're trying to create a good routine, you're creating this, binge, to the point where maybe it's not, a full-on binge, but you're also getting into things that are maybe not optimal in supporting you towards your goal. And so, that's where the insulin and the blood sugar are on a roller coaster. Well, if those are on a roller coaster during the day, if you end up and you stimulate cortisol in the evening because you've created a misalignment with it, right? You've peaked it. Well, then you're not going to end up and have the leptin signaling. Well, the leptin docks to the hypothalamus at night, and it tells the body, which also comes into play with melatonin. It tells the body, hey, we have energy reserves to use. So remember when you set the New Year's resolution that you wanted to lose weight, the body isn't getting that signal or that cue that, hey, we don't need to end up and create, this starving, right? We end up when we have energy, we are safe, right? That's a big thing right now, is creating safety with the body and getting these satiety signals. So then the hunger, right? The ghrelin's going to end up and be more, and you're going to feel hungrier. So there again, you're not going to end up and see the results that you're after, potentially be gaining weight. And then you feel again back in that cycle where I failed, because, I'm doing all the things that I'm supposed to be doing, but it's not working. And so then you're like, the heck with it, to keep this PG. And, you throw caution to the wind and you say, forget it. Where, like I said, the body is wanting safety. It is wanting consistency, not necessarily more intensity. So ask yourself some of these questions of, is my body feeling safe? What am I doing on the parasympathetic side, right? Am I getting quality sleep? What does my lighting look like? Am I sitting in blue light at night? Am I, on a computer without blue blockers or a red screen? Am I scrolling my phone before going to bed so that I'm not getting quality sleep? All of those are going to end up and play into the fact of, do you just feel meh, as my kids would say? I always ask them, I'm like, how are you feeling? Meh. It's like, what even is that? I mean, but yeah, then, your cravings are going to increase and your discipline to stay on course is going to feel harder.
Yeah. Well, and just so everyone knows, cortisol is your wake up and stress hormone. It helps you get out of bed. There is supposed to be a natural rise in cortisol in the morning. Now, if you were somebody like me, a type 2 diabetic, right, the cortisol would go completely and crazily out of control in the morning, and it would continue to rise and rise and rise. And this has been a few years ago, where I was wearing a CGM, a continuous glucose monitor, and I would watch my cortisol, my blood sugar rise noon, 1 o'clock, before it would finally start going down. And that's where things are different, right, as a type 2 diabetic. But cortisol isn't bad. It was bad the way I was doing things. It was, and we could have a whole podcast on that alone. But I just wanted to give people kind of a definition of what cortisol is. But your hormones, and I'm actually working on a master class of breaking down hormones. You and I've talked about this,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm slowly working on a master class of talking about hormones. It's something that I did not understand for the first couple years of my healing journey, right? Because I was too busy listening to influencers that said, oh, I had to eat a certain way, and oh, I had to do this. And I'm sure you remember, Becky, early on in that, my breakdown that I had on a meeting, and I just sobbed because nothing was working, right? And it's because I didn't have a foundation of what hormones were involved and how to work with those hormones. And so that was a learning lesson. So I think a master class would be a nice place to start for folks that kind of was in that situation that I was in. And I know you were too. You
Mm-hmm.
were in the same situation as well when you started your journey. Um, but the hidden thing that people don't talk about is hydration. Oh, and that is not about drinking your 64 ounces of water or your gallon of water a day, right? Let's really talk about that.
Yeah, there is a difference in just gulping a bunch of water and truly getting proper hydration and actually getting hydration into the cell. I mean, you posted on social media the other day, before I go too deep into this, you posted on social media the other day, even just for lab work, how the difference in making sure you are, fully hydrated, right? The cells are hydrated, the bloodstream, right? All of that is, and so there is a difference when in how our body uses this hydration. Um, but yeah, it does end up and make a difference. It makes a difference on what we are adding. A lot of people will go lower carb also, right? They may end up and shift their nutritional routine. I'll put it that way. It's not necessarily just low carb, but most people start eating better, right? So they start to
Hmm.
give up maybe the ultra processed foods. And what that does is it also ends up and cuts the sodium side. Or maybe, they end up and they have the goal of just drinking more plain water. Well, that also ends up and depletes things. You can actually make yourself sick by drinking too much just plain water. And, so again, cutting sodium, reducing processed foods and cutting the sodium. Maybe you're drinking more water, you have a water goal, right? But that all ends up and it can also create that brain fog, fatigue, headaches, Well, are you going to end up and be motivated to stick with your goals if you are tired and you have a headache? I don't know about you, but I wouldn't necessarily. And so this is also where the nervous system kind of going back into, all of that and cellular dehydration. So it's not
Mhm.
necessarily that you are lazy. It's that the body and the fascia system of the body is just simply dehydrated. And so like I said, when people start to end up and eat better, they get rid of the packaged food items. It sounds healthy and everything, but the hidden, aspect, and this is where I personally do not use a lot of supplements, right?
Mhm.
But there are those that are non-negotiable. And for me, it deals with or revolves around proper hydration. So I end up and I do hydrogen water. I
Mhm.
do shilajit, which is a mineral resin, and I do electrolytes. So, like I said, what most people unknowingly do is just simply get rid of the bad things, right? But they don't add anything in that is going to help
Right.
with the energy side of things. That's people don't look at, sodium, potassium, magnesium as cellular energy. And when we dig deep, right? Well, how is your body creating energy? It's not just creating energy out of the food that you're putting in your mouth. We are electrical beings. And when we end up, when we have this energy, whether it's gaining electrons from the earth by grounding, or whether we are creating energy through ATP, electrolytes are important. That is, sodium and potassium create this cellular energy. So sodium is outside the cell, right? It is, and then potassium is inside the cell. And together, these maintain this electrochemical gradient across the cell membrane. I have a circadian masterclass that I've
Mhm.
done that I dig into what is this, exclusion zone water? What is this, cellular hydration? Because this gradient, it allows the nutrients in the cell. And this is also where insulin is important because insulin will help with shuttling. And yes, I end up and I talk with my hands. My husband and daughter make fun of me. So if you if you are watching, get used to me talking with my hands. But this is where insulin is also important. So if maybe you've been carnivore or you've been keto and you've been told, to keep your insulin low, right? That can end up in backfire because the cells aren't necessarily getting the signal or the nutrients, right? Again, going back to this cellular electricity. And so that whole ATP and electron transport chain end up and make a difference because you have to be able to get the nutrients into the cell. Your toe has to be able to tell your brain, right, what is going on. So you have to get nutrients in the cell. Your nerves have to end up in fire. Your muscles have to end up and contract if you're going to end up and be, in the gym and you're utilizing those muscles. They have to end up and be working properly. Again, what helps all of this? Making sure that your body is running efficient with sodium, potassium, magnesium. Have you ever ended up and gone, say, and adjusted your nutrition and you get leg cramps?
Mhm.
It's typically from a lack of magnesium. If you end up and you get an eye twitch, many people think that is common, but that can also, now let me end up and stop and say, this is not medical advice. We're not end up, if you are not working with us one on one, we are not suggesting that you end up and you add any form of supplementation without working with someone and or a coach or a physician. Now, with that disclaimer said, an eye twitch can end up and be a lack of potassium. And the reason why I say that is people can over supplement also. So there is this whole bell curve where not supplementing, but I'm also not talking about supplementing with all the other crap in a lot of the fancy, products. All you need is your base minerals.
Mhm.
You don't need the flavoring and the sweetener and the, hydrate in a packet type thing.
Right.
You just need the basics because those are what is going to end up and tell your body what to do with those electrolytes. And so when you create this cellular dehydration, like I said, a lot of people don't end up and look at this. And that's one of the things, even like my bioimpedance scale will end up and tell me, is the aspect of body water, essentially, or cellular hydration. Because it's not the same as thirst, right? So when we think of dehydration, people automatically go to thirst. But cellular dehydration isn't, it's the water around the cell, right? And when our cells end up and start to get depleted, our ATP production declines. The mitochondria require magnesium, that is your ATP stabilizer. Your potassium is the enzyme activating. Your sodium is the membrane potential. So when the electrolytes are low, again, going back to this ETC, the electron transport chain, the efficiency in this drops. Well, what ends up and happens? Your ATP, quote, energy decreases. So the cells end up in this energy conservation mode where the body doesn't end up and respond, and it starts to slow down because it thinks it needs to end up and conserve. So, this is also where people will say, I'm doing everything right, but I'm getting brain fog. We have, a member of the community that simply started adding an extra shilajit, right? An extra mineral, and the brain fog disappeared just off adding minerals alone. People will end up and, notice that much of a difference because the nervous system can't fire properly. These neurons are all electrical cells, and it causes a slower transmission rate. It causes, like I said, the brain fog, the headache, the low motivation. Some people can even get anxiety from it. So you have to be able to have this protective response. It's not that you're lazy. The body just doesn't have what it needs to fire properly.
Well, and here's the other thing. Wintertime makes you more dehydrated than summer, believe it or not, because most people think that dehydration is a summer problem, but the winter dehydration is kind of sneaky because the cold air actually suppresses thirst. Um, and the indoor heating dries out your skin and your lungs, and you sweat more than you think under different layers. So, you know, that's happening. And so when you're dehydrated, it actually kills your motivation. It lowers your mood and reduces your focus and increases your cortisol. Here we go, that stress hormone. And it makes workouts feel harder, and it makes habits feel heavier, right? And so here's an example, right? If you're tired and cranky and craving carbs at 3 p.m., you're probably dehydrated.
Yep. And it also, to kind of go back into where I was originally going with
Hmm.
the hydration side of things, is low blood volume. So you also have the lower oxygen delivery side of things because electrolytes help with regulating blood volume, right? So low sodium equals, low plasma volume, which reduces the oxygen delivery. And so, if your body isn't getting proper oxygen either, right, it also reduces this mitochondrial respiration, aka less oxygen, less ATP. So, again, you may end up in just, people are always hard to describe what they're actually feeling. And it can
Hmm.
be this sluggish or this heavy, unmotivated, just kind of flat, right? It's not necessarily, again, that you are unmotivated, but that's where the hydrogen side of thing. Yes, hydrogen is, the isotope of hydrogen water, right? We end up when we use Echo Water. We have a link. We can end up and share it, but there's also a discount code BNC10 for the hydrogen flask. They're also coming out with some new products as well.
Hmm.
Very excited for. Um, but just by increasing and getting that extra hydrogen, there's a lot of benefits from not only, the brain health, but it can also end up and help the gut. You can inhale hydrogen as well, and there's a lot of benefits on that side of it too. A lot of people will use it for sleep. Do hydrogen therapy before they go to sleep. I've had a lot of people that increase their quality of sleep off of it. We've also done a couple podcasts with Dr. Paul Barrietto, which is the founder of Echo Water. And so check out those podcasts as well, because we dive into, the benefits of hydrogen water with that too. But again, it kind of all goes into the mitochondrial hydration side of thing. And how do we end up when we restore energy? You have to be intentional with what you are doing as far as your hydration goes.
Right. So low hydration makes your cortisol rise, right? And you feel overwhelmed. Low electrolytes kind of makes your serotonin drop and then your mood dips. So dehydration makes your ghrelin, that's the hunger, right, hormone, ghrelin, rise, and all of a sudden your cravings increase. Your hormonal swings, the motivation feels inconsistent. So by understanding even just hydration when it comes to your hormones and your motivation, right? All of a sudden it's like light bulbs go off, right? And we could dive into the whole hormonal fluctuations with women and their cycles, and how dehydration works on that as well. But let's go ahead and let's talk about the circadian rhythm, that hidden driver behind that fatigue that's happening at week 2, And what is that? What am I talking about? I'm talking about your energy and your hunger and your mood and your focus and your motivation and your hormone release and your body temperature and your sleep quality, right? So again, I had said earlier that circadian rhythm is your body's 24-hour clock, right? It's when week 2 hits, your wake up time changes because you're getting up maybe and you're going and working out at 4:30 in the morning. Your meal timings changes, your workout time changes, your light exposure changes, right? But how long does it take, Becky, for you to adjust to that circadian rhythm?
I've seen people that have simply adjusted their circadian rhythm and they've had a difference in sleep within 24, 48 hours. I've seen people that have completely disrupted their circadian rhythm and had issues, the next day. So it can end up and happen rather quick, but it also depends on where you are coming from, how diligent you are with your routine. That is one of, my non-negotiables. Is the light and the dark. And like I said, sitting in, my red amber colored ball or amber light in the evening, because again, there's a difference in light, in the morning and that energy programming side of things, and also at night, right? And so you don't want to have this bright lux intensity of light first thing in the morning, but you also don't want to end up and have it at night, because it is an aspect where your sleep or your energy, right, can end up and play a role. Now, there is different times of the day on a, circadian perspective that are important. So sunrise, but let me backtrack. The thing with nature is balanced. Nature is going to end up and have full spectrum. So nature is never going to isolate, like an LED bulb isolates more the blue and the green, or an red light therapy panel isolates the infrared and the near infrared, right? You are isolating those, and yes, I end up and I have, my red light too. I'm not saying that they are bad. But when you are able to get the natural form, AKA go outside, it's free, right? I'm not telling you to buy a bunch of product here in order to set your circadian rhythm. But in the morning, again, as Coach Sherry's saying here, you want this cortisol rise to rise naturally, but also the side of nutrients, right? Sodium reabsorption in the kidneys increases. You also end up and have The cells prime to hydrate because they've been dehydrated all night. So what you give yourself first thing, right? You don't want to end up and be sipping on coffee first thing. Give it, some hydrogen water, give it some electrolytes, give it some minerals, because the mitochondria are ready to end up and produce this energy. Eating within, that 30 minutes to an hour of being up is also another signal to the body that is going to support that production. Stabilize the blood pressure, stabilize the blood sugar, that whole dopamine tone. Well, then you end up and you have, this UVA rise. So sunrise is, yes, predominantly red light. You are going to end up and get predominantly red at sunrise, but then you end up and you gravitate into UVA, which is going to end up and help with, the alpha MSH. It's going to help with the HPA, HPG axis. It's going to help with the serotonin. It's going to help with the dopamine. All of that side of, your hormones. Again, you're not blasting yourself. If you want to end up and do exercise or activity, end up and do it after, right? You've ate, do it after you see natural light, and put it in there also away from bedtime. But daytime light, a lot of people, don't take light breaks, as we call them in the BNC
Mm-hmm.
community. They don't take these light breaks, but yet, Bobby Joe across, the cubicle may end up and go out and have a smoke break, but you won't get off, and out of the building to end up and go and get a light break. Even on lunch, right? Go walk around the building, go walk down the sidewalk, go stand at the front door. I don't care, right? But there are
Mm-hmm.
so many signals that happen at this peak mitochondrial side of things where it is more of a solar noon. Your insulin sensitivity is going to end up and be the highest. Your cells are going to end up and be able to use glucose. This is the other reason why I talk about, putting even just a short walk after a meal, is because your cells are going to use that glucose more efficiently. The sodium and potassium side of the pumps of the body, right, are going to end up and work more optimally. So all of this is going to end up and be the strongest, right? So eating, moving, hydrating maximizes that energy. But then also nighttime, you want the body to start winding down. So where I talk about, that curve or that hill, right? We're not creating peaks, we're creating hills, responsive hills. That's where you want morning to see this gradual rise, midday it to peak. Nighttime, you want more of the repair. You don't want to be doing, these high stimulating, high activity, high exercise type things late in the evening. That is going to end up and disrupt that cortisol again, right? It's going to end up and keep it elevated. Same thing with eating too close to bed, not keeping 3-4 hours before bedtime for your last meal, because digestion raises cortisol, it raises insulin. Those both oppose, I can't even talk tonight, oppose melatonin. So you're not going to have the melatonin rise. You're not going to end up and have the leptin signal that you end up and you need. You're not going to end up and have, this whole sensitivity side that is supposed to be falling, right? The insulin, the cortisol, all of that, and allowing this other, fat burning side to end up and increase. The other thing with late night eating is going to end up and, suppress that fat burning. A lot of people right now are talking about fasting and they're talking about autophagy. Again, you're suppressing that. You're confusing the hydration signals. You're reducing that repair that the body ends up and it knows it needs to do. So again, this confusion is relating to inefficiency.
So, okay, everybody, get ready. Okay, get a pen and paper. Becky and I are going to give you a couple little reboot rituals you can do to get your motivation going again. Um, and we talked about the first one. It's water with minerals, right? 8 ounces. Let's start with 8 ounces with your electrolyte minerals. And what that's doing is it's helping your cells communicate. And why that works is because, again, it supports the hydration plus the hormone balance. So 8 ounces of water with minerals. So write that down. Um, let's talk about breathing.
Mhm. Yep,
You
that
do that
go
a
ahead.
lot. Yeah, go ahead.
I do, because as someone that had autoimmune thyroid condition, parasympathetic work and really making sure that the body is sensing the safety in order to create the energy is so important. And that's where people end up and look at their macro ratio, or people look at how much they're consuming, but they never really end up and stop to think about, maybe it's just simply what I'm not doing. And a lot of times that is the breath work. It is that calm, right? um we always talk about the calm before the storm, but your body is sitting so much in that storm state that you need to create the calm. So same thing with digestion, right? Maybe you're someone that gets bloating with meals. Maybe you don't have, good enzymatic function with the gut, but even most of the time it's because are so go, go, go. They're grabbing food and they're rushing to eat it. They're not sitting and they're not slowing down. So simply in the morning, doing, a few breaths, sitting down before meals, taking a few deep breaths, doing it even through the day. I'm not talking about solely through your mouth. I'm also talking through your nose. Many times we end up and especially as we're breathing, we're doing those
Hmm.
shallow breaths. We're not getting
Yeah.
that full deep breath. Breathe in, hold, and then be able to exhale. That also increases the nitric oxide by breathing through the nose. So there are a lot of benefits to just simply slowing down and doing some breath work. We see it in blood sugar numbers as well. You can end up and see blood sugar numbers, can't you?
I can. Yep. I have, again, worn my that CGM. I went into some meditative yoga, and I think the biggest drop I had seen was a 27-point drop in my blood sugar by doing meditative yoga, breathing and relaxing. And I would have told you before I started that, oh, I'm not stressed. I don't, and apparently I was, right. And we seen that. We did a lot of experiments with that, and with just simple breath work, you can get your blood sugars to even come down. It's crazy. 30 seconds of movement, a minute of movement. Why does that work?
It's going to end up and shuttle the glucose into the muscles. It's going to end up and also create blood flow. So again, going back to the blood volume side of things, where the body isn't creating this oxygen, right? You're not getting that blood flow, that blood pumping essentially. And so even just doing, that can be some calf raises while you're standing at the counter. It can end up and be some squats, if you've gone to the bathroom. Maybe you're at work and you're in the bathroom stall, simply doing just some squats in the bathroom. It doesn't have to be always elaborate, type things, but just simply doing that, get the blood flowing. It will also decrease that peak that we may end up and see from a meal.
Right. And then the last one, and I think one of the most important ones, is your light exposure. What tip can you give everyone for their wake up light exposure, right? Because, I was one of them way back in the day. I'm like, I ain't getting up at the crack of dawn, and it's not happening. So, what kind of motivation or little tips can you give people for that light exposure, and how long?
So with light exposure, natural is always going to end up and be best. If you can get natural morning sunlight before any screens, and this is one of the things that we've also used in challenges within the community as well, is staying off screens before bed, but also limiting them in the morning, because a lot of people will get up, they look at their phone, maybe they're checking emails, they're checking their daily calendar to see, what appointments they end up and they have. But the biggest thing, if you can't, do like a whole overhaul, right? I was not one when I started this that I could do a whole overhaul of my lights, right? And sit under these type of lights. So I have the blue blockers. When I travel, I still end up and I travel with my blue blockers. And the other side, I was looking to see where my switch was, because the other side is I have a bunch of salt lamps sitting around my house. So, I'll end up and I'll turn my salt lamp on. It gives this amber glow, but the lux of light off of those salt lamps is still low enough lux. I do have one in my bathroom and it has a red bulb in it. And I end up and I use that because when I get up, the sun isn't up. I'm in Nebraska, right? So I am up before sunrise. But again, I don't want to go through the house kicking on a bunch of overhead blue lights before I ever get outside. So I have my salt lamps or my blue blockers that I end up and I wear. Simple, but it is so powerful in the signals that our body ends up and needs. So, I end up I have the low lux of light, and these are all powerful anchors of limiting your light. If you're not someone that is, like you said, it was hard to end up in shift, right? As we start to get earlier, we're in the perfect season to end up and start this because sunrise is later. It's a lot easier to start when the sunrise is at 7:30 than when the
Mm-hmm.
sunrise is at 5:30. So
Absolutely.
now is the time to end up and start. And comment in the chat if you are someone that sees sunrise, either put a sun or put me and let us know that you are someone that is respecting the circadian rhythm. But the
Me.
power right, the powerful anchors are going to end up and be that morning sunlight before screen, getting that hydration, and being outside. So, you know, with that, right, that can end up and be just simply setting your alarm clock 15 minutes earlier. Say right now you're getting up at 9 o'clock and sunrise is at 7:30. Start getting up at 8:45 tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
Adjust that, as your body is still getting that quality of sleep. Again, it starts in the evening. So if you start to limit your light exposure in the evening, you wear your blue blockers, your red blue blockers before bed, you turn the lights down, you start to do, some of these things in the evening, you will notice your sleep window starts to end up and shift to where you are getting that quality sleep earlier and you are able to end up and get up in the morning. But so dim lights after sunset, minimal food at night, making sure that you're spacing your food out. Get morning, low light, amber colored, red colored before sunrise. Get out for first morning light, daybreak, sunrise, that type of light. After being up within that hour window, make sure you're getting a protein rich breakfast. And your bigger meal should end up and be earlier, whether that
Mm-hmm.
be breakfast. Maybe you're someone that isn't used to eating breakfast, make it your lunch. Slowly end up in transition to where one of your first two meals of the day, eat breakfast. There's a lot of studies out there that are also showing that eating earlier, time
Mm-hmm.
restricted eating earlier in the day is providing more benefit than fasting through the morning, especially with all these hormones that we're talking about. And then make sure you're getting movement in daylight.
So, Becky, I'm going to have you throw up the banner for how people can join the BNC community. But let's kind of recap here for a moment while she's doing that. The truth behind this mysterious week 2 slump is not really a lack of willpower. It's not a personal flaw. It's not a sign from the universe that you should, give up, retreat to the couch and with your blanket and your snack, right? It's your biology doing what biology does, and it's recalibrating and it's adjusting. And guess what? It's sometimes throwing a temper tantrum. So next time you feel that motivation slipping, remember, nothing is wrong with you. Your hormones are just negotiating, right? Your hydration is filing a complaint. You're not giving it enough hydration. Your circadian rhythm is trying to find that light switch. Um, the sun outside, right? Give your body a little patience and a little water and some sunlight, and you'll be back on track. Now, do you find this so fascinating, right? And we piqued your interest. Becky, you want to tell everyone how they can join us?
If they end up and they go to bnccommunity.com, they will be able to see all the details as far as how to fully join. But bnccommunity.com, the community is there, the coaching is there. It is the banner streaming across the bottom of the screen, ticking, I guess is what it is called, across the bottom. Unless you're over there on Instagram, it looks like it is coming across the top of our heads.
Oh,
So
yeah.
either way, we'd love to end up and have you join us. And remember, energy isn't just about what you eat, it is about what your cells are told to do as far as work. And when your circadian rhythm is aligned, motivation stops being such a fight.
Absolutely. So don't forget to like and subscribe. If you found this very helpful and interesting, and you think somebody would benefit from it, please share. And we are going to have a guest next week,
We
and
will.
I'm excited. So this is somebody I have known for 33 years. I have watched him at his peak. I think he said he was 359 pounds. Um, he has lost 90 pounds. Um, and I really want to have him come on and talk about his healing journey that he's done in the last 4 years, and how he's lost 90 pounds and what it's taken to get there and what he had to learn, because this is the man who I would go out to eat with, the group setting, and we'd be like, "Here, finish this," and we'd throw like food on his plate, and he would. So I've got stories galore. He knows where all of my skeletons are hidden, so please be kind. But do post questions if you have questions, and we want to hear from a guy's perspective. So thank you so much for tuning in. Any last words, Becky?
Nope. Join us in the community. And again, we are out to help the people. So if you end up and have any content you would like us to end up and talk about, debate, discuss, we are more than happy. So leave those comments. And like Coach Sherri said, make sure you subscribe. Leave us comments on the podcast as well, because we are getting the podcast up and going. So make sure you find us on all streaming platforms as well. Have a wonderful night, and we will see you either in the community or next week. Have a wonderful week, everyone.